Welcome, fellow horror aficionados, to another bone-chilling episode of Scream Creeps. I'm your host, Jeremy, and I'm here with Josh, and today we're diving headfirst into the terrifying world of one of the most iconic horror films of all time, Scream. But before we unravel the secrets and slash our way through this horror classic, let's set the stage. In the year 2020, the world of horror was analyzed by science, dissected and scrutinized to determine the 35 scariest films ever made. And guess what? Scream clawed its way up to the 20th spot, cementing its status as a spine-tingling masterpiece. So grab your popcorn, a trusty weapon of choice, and your best ghost face mask, because tonight we're diving deep into this sinister slice of horror history. In this episode, we'll discuss the genius of Wes Craven, the iconic mask, and the game-changing rules of the genre that Scream brought to the forefront. We'll explore the blood-soaked legacy that this film has left on the horror genre, and why it's still relevant to this day. So whether you're a die-hard Scream fan or a curious newcomer, get ready for a roller coaster of scares, laughs, and screams. Scream is on the chopping block, and we're ready to dissect it scene by scene. So grab your favorite knife and phone with a ringtone that will haunt your dreams, because it's time to talk about Scream. Let's get started. So, one thing I wanted to point out, Scream came out back in 1996 and is considered an American slasher film. As I stated, was directed by Wes Craven, but was written by Kevin Williamson. It stars David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, and Drew Barrymore. Set in the small American town of Woodsboro, Scream's plot follows high school student Sidney Prescott and her friends, who on the anniversary of her mother's murder become the targets of a costume serial killer known as Ghostface. Williamson, who was a struggling writer at the time, was inspired by reports of a series of murders by the Gainesville Ripper as he wrote a screenplay that satirized the cliches of the slasher genre, popularized in films such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street. Developed under the title Scary Movie, Williamson's script became the subject of an intense bidding war for multiple studios before Miramax Films purchased the rights. Despite turning down the opportunity multiple times, Craven agreed to direct it after reading the script and being disappointed by the failure of Vampire in Brooklyn in 1995. The involvement of Barrymore and Cox helped secure support from the studio. Principal photography took place from April to June of 1996 in California on a budget of $15 million. Craven trimmed down the violence in the film after being involved in a tense conflict with the Motion Picture Association of America over the desired R rating. Scream wasn't expected to perform well when it came out on December 20th, 1996, due to concerns over releasing a slasher film in a time normally reserved for holiday entertainment. But it went on to gross approximately $173 million worldwide through the strength of word of mouth, becoming a surprise success and one of the highest grossing films of the year. Reviews praised the performances of its cast and its unique meta-humor, but criticized its excessive violence and lack of suspense in favor of that humor. We'll talk about this, but the opening sequence, which Barrymore's character is killed, received praise for building tension and suspense and for subverting audience expectations for Barrymore at the time. Scream is now regarded as one of the greatest horror and slasher films ever made. It's been credited with rekindling interest in the horror genre during the 90s following a decline in the genre's popularity. It has remained influential as Barrymore's involvement helped make participating in horror films more acceptable to prominent actors and increased horror films' appeal with younger audiences. The success of the film launched a multimedia franchise which comprises the films Scream 2, Scream 3 in 1997, Scream 3 in 2000, Scream 4 in 2011, Scream, which is the fifth installment, which came out in 2022, and Scream 6, which came out earlier this year, as well as an anthology TV series. with that, we'll go ahead and get started about what our thoughts are over the years of the film, and we'll discuss how we really deemed it scary. I'm going to look up the stats, but I think it was like 7 beats per minute changes from the base heart rate to the highest, or the average beat per minute for the movie, compared to what we talked about last week, which was The Witch.
Yeah, this is leaps and pounds better than that movie. But I mean, also at the same time, I've seen it like a million times. It seems like now, like especially the stuff with Drew Barrymore. When I first watched it, I never knew that. Like, I wasn't thinking about like that she was so many people thought that she was going to be the final girl or something in this movie.
Yeah,
like just because she was like the most known at the time.
Yeah, I do remember when I first saw it originally that I didn't think she would die within the first 2 minutes or whatever, 5 minutes or whatever it was.
Well, I mean, I don't even remember that I saw anything with Drew Barrymore on it, but like when I first watched it, so I was like, "Oh shit, she was in the movie." But I don't remember. I don't know.
Well, she's on the cover.
A long time since the first time I watched it. Yeah, and that's one thing that's funny about it is that she was barely even in the movie, and then she's on the cover with all the other people.
Yeah. So for the stats, as I've stated before, the resting heart rate average was 65, and the average movie heart rate for this movie was 73. So that's and the highest spike was 81 beats per minute. So that's an 8 beats per minute overall average. So, like in comparison, it was The Grudge we saw last time, not The Witch. The Grudge was number 21. That was 6 beats per minute difference. So that's 2 beats already in that one. So you could see where we're heading because we're at number 20 right now. So
yeah, it's probably just going to be like 8 beats per minute more, 9. You know, like up until it goes up to like the last movie. But yeah, I don't know. I just always have loved this movie, and it shows like I think one reason why people always liked or gravitated to this movie is how much like by this point before this movie came out that they would talk about the horror tropes in movies like, what the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck out of the house. Or whatever, you know? They would talk about that constantly whenever they would talk about horror movies. It's that they would do dumb decisions in horror movies. So it was nice knowing that in this movie, they talk about it, and then they're like, they kind of play off of it. Like, even like the virgin thing, that was like a huge thing in this movie, was like her being like final girls always being virgins and this and that. And then they kind of played on that where essentially that the final girl, like, I mean, it wasn't even final girls in this movie really, because her, Gail, and yeah, I think her and Gail were the main ones that were like the females that survived, but a few people survived.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention the fact that when I was talking about the cast, that Jamie Kennedy was in this movie. I don't think I brought that up.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
he was the main one that was the comic relief. And in comparison, if people watching or listening to the podcast, the female character that had the brother in the latest Scream movies, plays the same character. Type of character in the latest ones. So she's the one that knows all the history of the movies and how movies go and who the suspect should be. And Jamie Kennedy played that character in this. I guess you could say the first, few movies.
Yeah. First 2.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So what's it called? Yeah, it's just so funny, like, watching this movie now, since the first time I watched it, the pacing was like, they would constantly go through stuff, like, they didn't have any waiting times for anything. And I don't remember that the first time I watched it.
Well, one
was because as soon as Drew Barrymore got killed, and her boyfriend got killed, it was like instantly that they started going into the next thing about who they were going to murder next.
Well,
essentially.
Yeah, and one thing that I didn't remember was Rose McGowan's death. I remember her getting.
I remember that one.
I remember her getting stuck in the garage door, but I don't remember her like neck getting stuck. For some reason, I wanted to think she was like halfway out, not just her head, basically.
Nope. I remember how ridiculous that, and like I was just like, why wouldn't you just, once it would go up, why wouldn't you just pull your body out? And that's like the main dumb move out of the whole movie.
It kind of almost makes me think it's almost like an homage to the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Remember when the mom at the very end gets pulled through the frickin' little tiny...
Oh, yeah.
And I know I'm talking about a movie that we'll actually be reviewing or here on the podcast soon, because that's Nightmare on Elm Street is number 13 on this list. So 7 movies from now we'll be talking about this of Nightmare on Elm Street. But that's also a Wes Craven film, and in the people have more than likely, if you're listening to this podcast, have seen that. But there's the scene at the very end when Nancy's mom gets pulled through the window of the door. And it's one of the worst film scenes that I have ever seen in a movie, because it literally looks like a mannequin that's being pulled through the
it looks like so fake. It looks like it doesn't even look like a mannequin. Yeah. It looks like a blow up doll.
But I mean, like you could tell it's not a real human person. Anyways, but it just reminded me of that, because she kind of made, the only thing is she wasn't pulled all the way through, but it kind of harkened back, and with this being a Wes Craven movie, I wonder if that was some inspiration
like an homage
to it. Yeah.
I don't know, it could have been.
But I mean, Matthew Lillard, we talked about this on the Five Nights at Freddy's podcast, but this was pretty much Matthew Lillard's breakout role, and he was awesome in it. His portrayal of Stu was great, especially at the end when he went full on nutso. Because I didn't feel, and the funny thing is, you could tell why, and this is my opinion, but Skeet Ulrich and him, you can tell why Matthew Lillard has done more since. Skeet Ulrich was good, popular for a time, but I haven't heard much from him in a while. But Matthew Lillard has still been doing things since then. And watching this again, you can tell why. Because he's really a better actor than Skeet Ulrich is.
Well, I mean, I don't think that there was, other than the Scream movie and then the newer ones, I don't remember so many movies that Skeet Ulrich was in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He was in I believe he was on a TV show at one point. But if he's been in movies and stuff, it's been on stuff that I don't know about, because like he was in, I guess when he was younger, he was in Weekend at Bernie's and Ninja Turtles, which I didn't know.
Whoa. I didn't know that either.
But after Scream, he had a small role in As Good as It Gets, which that's what I remember him from. Outside of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's done very little. And he, if you guys have seen the latest Scream movies, he's made appearances in them. Those flashback kind of things or visions, because of the premise behind those movies. We talked about those movies on previous podcasts, though. So I don't think did we review Scream 6? I know we talked about Scream in 2022.
I think we did Scream and Scream 6,
For some reason, I drew a blank that we watched that one,
or
talked about it.
Or at least I'm pretty sure that we have.
But
I'm pretty sure we have.
But yeah, he's done not a lot since 1996.
Oh yeah,
not as much as Matthew Lillard.
Matthew Lillard hasn't. I don't know what else he has done other than Five Nights. I'm like, I know that he's done some stuff.
Well, dude, he was Shaggy in Scooby.
Well, I know Shaggy. Yeah, I mean, like lately, I meant. Like, I don't know what other movies he was doing. But, it's like, he's very quotable in this movie anyway. Like, one of the main ones is when he's like where he stabbed him, and he's like, "Look at me! I think you stabbed me
too hard." Yeah.
way too hard.
I think I'm dying,
I
man.
think I'm dying
The
here."
funniest part to me, though,
yeah.
was when he was talking about his parents are going to be upset at him.
Oh yeah,
because
yeah, that was funny. He was like, "They're going to be so mad at me."
Like you're thinking, but that's how a person in that state of mind would probably be thinking. They wouldn't be thinking like any.
Well, they thought they were going to get scot-free out of it. So, like, that's what they were thinking. They thought that it was going to be easy. Turned out that it was a lot harder than they expected.
But yeah, from this standpoint, the other thing too was like the end when the killer was killed. She made sure he was dead. So and that's kind of the premise about this franchise, is that each movie, and we won't go into specifics on each one, we may talk about them at some point on the podcast, but each movie in the franchise, the ending, the killer has been killed and actually made sure that they're not alive anymore. So there's not like a Michael Myers still showing up, or a Jason Voorhees or a Freddy Krueger showing up for the second one. So again, spoiler alert, Billy Loomis does not come back in another Scream movie.
There's been rumors that Sue Mocker, and like people have been fan theorizing, like, you wouldn't have died off of that. Trust me, you getting a damn TV thrown on your head, you're dead. Especially with the old brick TVs like those.
And the electricity that flows through them. I mean,
the electricity that is through because I only know because I went to an electrician's class and stuff like that, that they even tell you to be very, very careful messing with the tubes that are inside the back of the TVs, because you could electrocute yourself bad with them if you do them wrong. So, like, if he got it slammed on his head, more than likely he's dead. So, like, no matter what anybody was saying, oh, he could have came back, no, he's for real done. Unless Wes Craven or somebody else comes back and then decides to do something, but I highly doubt it.
So yeah,
it's been like what, like 20 years since the first one came out?
Yeah, so since, and Matthew Lillard, I guess, is kind of the same, but as Skeet Ulrich, I didn't think so, but when looking at his history, he's voiced Scooby-Doo for like the last 20 years, or Shaggy in cartoons. He's every year he's made multiple multiple things where he's voiced Shaggy, and since he did Scooby-Doo back in 2000.
I mean, it makes sense anyway. He plays this perfect Shaggy.
So,
like, I remember seeing how close he was to the character anyway in that one.
He's still one of my favorites, and like we talked about it in Five Nights at Freddy's, it was good. It was cool to see him again. Like,
especially when like, one of my favorite movies that Matthew Lillard's ever been in was 13 Ghosts, and not a lot of people love that movie. Mm-hmm. And eventually we got to talk about that on the channel, I'm sure, but that's one of my favorite movies that he's ever been in. Other than this one, I still love him in this one.
Yeah,
too.
In terms of,
it's mostly.
No, I'm just saying, in terms of scary movie, being number 20 on the list, I can see why I don't get the average of increasing by 8. It's got to be the anticipation of not knowing. I can imagine that most of these people the people they had picked for this study, I can imagine that none of them had seen any of the movies that they were getting ready to watch. Because I don't know how, if you've seen this movie, I don't know how your heart rate would go up by 8.
Yeah.
I just don't. And rewatching it, I still don't, because there really wasn't anticipation. I guess the only anticipation would be as how were they going to die, but you could guess that they were going to, based on the simple fact that the killer showed up. Yeah. So now, seeing it for the first time, like, I think the one area that may have raised a heart rate was the very beginning, where we were talking about Drew Barrymore dying.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that anybody watching that would have expected that to happen right off the bat.
Oh, right off the bat, yeah.
So
especially the trivia questions where they killed the boyfriend and all that.
Well,
like where she's like freaking out.
Yeah, and I didn't recall like seeing his guts hanging out the other times that I remember watching it. But anyhow, but in terms of scary and being scary, it was the first time. Yes, I could see it.
Yeah, the first time, yeah.
And we talked about,
but I mean, also,
no, and we talked about too on the one made back in 2022, the first one with Jenna Ortega, that there was a way of filming like that one had way more anticipatory stuff in it than even this one did. Like that one scene where the dude is walking through his house and he'd open up his fridge, and then you were thinking, is he going to be behind the fridge when he closes it, or when he opens the cabinet door? There was a lot of that in that Scream movie. Like in this one, there wasn't a lot of that. So it was like,
yeah, like what's it called? I think because I recently watched the Insidious, the Red Door movie, and like that had more like anticipatory stuff in it, because it was like you would see, like they would do a regular scene, but then you would see people behind them slowly getting close to the car, and then they would do, or like wherever they're at, and then they would cut away, and then they would do a jump scare afterwards. So like that was more like you're like, ooh, where is it gonna, like, when's it gonna happen? Where's it gonna happen? It didn't really happen in this movie at all.
Yeah, this one.
But I mean, also at the same time, most slasher movies, I don't think that I've ever seen them be like that anyway.
Yeah, and this one, the biggest jump scare that I remember, and watching it again, the only one that I felt that there was at the very end of the movie. And I mean, before the credits hit. Remember when they did the whole screen with showing Ghostface right before the credits hit? That was the part I forgot about. So that got so that was the only part that really would in the movie, I think, would be considered for me was a jump scare, was that part, and it wasn't even really part of the movie. So but even when Ghostface would show up, it wasn't like, oh shit, he scared me, you know. It was normally kind of easily known that it was going to occur at the time that it did.
Yeah.
But I tell you, the movie was great just because of the twist at the end. I remember the first time watching this, I didn't anticipate it being those two.
Yeah,
and I don't think if I remember,
because they kept playing it like it was the boyfriend, and then they didn't play it off like, oh, maybe it could be two people. And it's like they never said that, so they were always thinking that it was going to be one person. Especially in most slasher films, I don't think that there was ever really more than one killer.
No,
because I'm thinking about like most of like My Bloody Valentine, Friday the 13th, all slasher films that I remember have been only one killer. So it was like whenever it did happen here, it was like, that's why it was so refreshing with this movie, is because they did so many things that most other horror films did not do or did do. And then they just were like, hey, we're not going to do that. We're going to change this around. That way it kept the slasher films as like refreshing rather than going back into the resting on the laurels thing, where it's just like typical like horror movies that people got bored of.
They made fun of the horror tropes in this one. And that's why I was saying that was a first start of doing that, because we talked about it on No One Will Save You. You weren't on that one, but how that movie was refreshing, and that she did everything in her scenario that you would envision somebody doing in that same, basically, if
Same
you were in that
experience, yeah.
same place, you would react the same way. I get so tired of watching these movies where it's like, why are you going? You know, they made a real funny commercial a while ago where there was a garage or a tool shed full of knives and shit, and this group of people said, hey, we need to hide in there.
Yeah.
And then a dude is behind
That was
them.
the car commercial or something like that.
And that's the same type of thing that this movie did, is that
They're
Jamie
like,
Kennedy
"Get in the
would
running
say,
car."
don't do that,
Yeah.
and then because it could be this, or you guys are the perfect suspects, and this franchise has just continued that with all 5 other movies. Now,
Yep.
did they do it well in some of the other ones? We'll talk about that in the future on future podcasts. We've already talked about a couple. Oh, one of them I know of. I don't know if we've talked about the Scream 6, though.
I thought we talked about Scream 6, but I mean, we could have.
I do know we talked about Scream, though, like the in 2022. I do know that, but I honestly don't recall talking about the newest one.
Yeah,
but it's
just
neither here nor there.
Watching the movie.
Yeah, I know
yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I know we watched it. It's just a matter of, did we talk about it? Because there was other stuff that. Yeah, I don't think we did, because we talked about I don't see it on here. We talked about Scream and then Black Phone.
Oh, maybe we were supposed to then.
Yeah, I don't think we ever did.
supposed to, and then we just didn't.
So for anyone in the comments, if you guys want us to talk about Scream 6 in the future, let us know. Just type in the comments below. But with that, I don't know how much more I have to say about the movie. It was a great movie. If you guys haven't seen it yet, I highly suggest it. It's currently on Max. So if you guys subscribe to Max, you guys can watch it. Otherwise, you can rent it on Vudu or Amazon Prime or something like that. But
I know I got all 4 Scream movies for like $10 or something like that. This was a long time ago, though.
Yeah, so I think I have. I don't think I have the first Scream movie bought. I may have it, but I watched it on Max regardless. This time, but in the next one, I think we're gonna. Well, in the next Scream Creeps podcast, we're gonna be talking about the number 19 movie on the list for the top 35 scariest, and that's going to be the 2017 version of It. So that might,
I have that too.
Yeah,
and I just recently got the second version.
So with my oldest watching Five Nights at Freddy's last time, I'm going to try to get him to watch It, because Pennywise was his, what do you say, bugaboo growing up. Like, if we walked into like Spirit Halloween or Party City or something at Halloween time and he saw that face, he wouldn't go down the aisle. So it has been my goal for years to indoctrinate him watching that film, to try to get him out of the being afraid of stuff. So I'll see if I'm actually able to get him to watch that. But that'll be the next one that comes out for Scream Creeps next Wednesday. But what we're thinking about doing is we've got a new podcast coming out called Theater Junkies that our brother Aaron is going to be hosting, that I think we'll be releasing our first episode of that podcast this weekend in place of a normal Scream Creeps episode, because the movie The Marvels is coming out. So the new Marvel Cinematic Universe movie is coming out on the 10th of November, which is this Friday. So I'm hoping that we go and watch that, and we talk about that movie on that podcast.
Yeah.
And
I was already planning on watching it anyway,
so expect that one to be more than likely the next one to come out on the YouTube channel. Outside of our wrestling podcast, we'll actually have a wrestling video come out on Thursday, where we talk about WWE Payback. We're a little behind on those. That pay-per-view was back, our premium live event was back in September, and we just got around to talking about it this week. But expect that one on Thursday, and then our Theater Junkies on Saturday, and then another wrestling podcast, a couple wrestling podcasts after that before we release our next Scream Creeps episode. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys haven't subscribed to the channel and you enjoy this content that we've been putting out on the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit like on the video, and then hit that bell so you get notified when our newer videos come out on the channel. And for all of us here at Scream Creeps, again, I'm Jeremy, and this is my brother Josh, and we'll see you on the next episode of Scream Creeps next Wednesday for the movie It. Have a good day, night, and all that good stuff, everyone.
Yeah, peace.